in 1899, Murray said that Minor had sent in, quote, no less than 12,000 quotes, and added, quote, so enormous have been Dr. Minor's contributions during the past 17 or 18 years that we could easily illustrate the last 4 centuries from his quotations alone. So it's no wonder that Murray really wanted to meet Minor along the way, this guy who was contributing so much to the dictionary. But their first meeting probably didn't take place quite like that dramatic legend that I think I compared it to Wilkie Collins. It sounded like a Wilkie Collins setup that we related at the beginning of part 1 of this podcast, the one that was published in The Strand in 1915. That sensationalized account has the two meeting in 1897 after Minor failed to attend the Great Dictionary Dinner, which sounds fun, thrown at Queen's College in Murray's honor to celebrate the dictionary's progress. And according to that legend, this was the first time Murray realized that his favorite contributor was actually an inmate in a mental asylum. But Winchester's research kind of turned up something different.
Yeah, both through his research and the discovery of a letter written by Dr. Murray in the Broadmoor archives, we can see that Murray, though he might have thought that Minor was just a retired doctor or a doctor in the asylum at first, he probably was clued into Minor's actual situation by the late 1880s and probably visited him as soon as 1891 rather than 1897. Murray was always really sensitive to Minor's situation, though, apparently never letting him know that he knew that Minor was mentally ill. So the two formed this kind of friendship that went beyond their working relationship. Murray even visited Minor on several occasions, though it's unclear, according to the Broadmoor records, exactly how often that occurred. Murray would supposedly telegraph ahead, however, to find out what Minor's exact mood was before visiting, and he would avoid coming if Minor was especially angry at the time.
But when he did visit, they had these very cozy experiences, kind of like two well-respected colleagues hanging out together. Murray and Minor would sit in Minor's day room and have some tea and have some cake in front of the fire, just like it was a normal kind of situation, just catching up.
Friends hanging out. So you'd think that maybe this friendship and having a purpose in the form of his dictionary work would have been really good for Minor's mental state, but his paranoid delusions just continued to get worse. He'd think that he was being drugged at night with chloroform, or tortured with electricity, or kidnapped from the asylum at night to be abused, so that nightly sexual abuse was still a big part of it, and he'd even tried to barricade his room at night to protect himself. And around the turn of the 20th century, on December 3rd, 1902 to be exact, he experienced a major setback. That morning, he actually mutilated his own genitals, and it seemed to be a desperate attempt to kind of put a stop to the indecent acts that he thought he was being forced to do every night. When asked why he did it, he said he did it, quote, in interests of morality.
So after that, he was kept in the infirmary for 4 months and then sent back to his rooms, but the delusions just persisted, and as the years went by, he continued to get worse mentally and work less and less, and also his health started to decline. So a lot of people, including Murray, began to petition for his release to his family, and at first these petitions were denied, but the government finally relented in 1910 and then granted Minor's release and ordered that he be deported back to the States. So Murray, who had by that time been knighted for his work in the dictionary, and his wife visited Minor one last time right before Minor left the country on April 15th, 1910, and he brought along a court photographer to document this final meeting between two friends and two really influential contributors to what was going to be a famous dictionary.
Murray was accompanied back to the States on a steamer by his brother Alfred, but it was really a long time before he actually made it home to Connecticut. He immediately went back to that hospital for the insane in D.C. that he was at previously, which is now St. Elizabeth's, and he spent almost 10 years there, kind of in the same way that he had lived at Broadmoor as a privileged inmate who still had nightly outbursts, so his problems kind of continued to progress, and in between he would sort of spend his days reading and painting and doing, his activities that he enjoyed, but still in ill health.
Yeah, so by 1919, though, he was finally allowed to go back to Connecticut to be near his family, and he died there March 26, 1920. Having been in prison the majority of his life by that point, or the hospital rather. So even though he lived this life of anonymity while he was locked away for so many years, his name is still pretty well known. It's still in the preface to the Oxford English Dictionary, in fact.
Yeah, which ultimately that dictionary took 70 years to complete. It was completed in 1928, which was a decade after Murray's death. And I think I saw this in that Nation article that we mentioned.
Give us some stats.
Yeah,
Elena.
some stats to kind of boggle the mind. In the end, the first edition, not including the supplements that were published after, but that first edition published in 1928 had 414,825 head words, so to speak, defined by 1,827,306 illustrative quotations over 15,490 pages. Pretty incredible.
Very incredible. And it sounds like Miner was a pretty significant part of all of that. So in recent years, consequently, more people have taken an interest in his life. And of course, there's Winchester's book that you mentioned in the beginning, and there's maybe even going to be a movie. Do you have any more info on that?
I don't have any more info on that. When you look it up, it just says that the movie The Professor and the Madman is in development. Apparently, Mel Gibson bought the rights to the movie in 1998. And they've gone through a couple of different directors, I think, and they're working on it, but I don't know when it's supposed to come out. But I think that'll be an interesting one to see when it does.
Yeah, it sounds like it would be a fantastic movie, actually. I'm imagining how you dramatize the dictionary writing scenes, though. Sort of like computer movies, they have to have scenes of like rapid typing, maybe page flipping through 16th century books.
Yeah, you'll have to really make looking up words interesting. But I guess hopefully we'll get to see that down the road. And as I mentioned, somebody did bring up this book on Facebook. So we're going to just throw it out there again like we always do. If you guys have read any cool historical books or have any other ideas that you want us to podcast about, please write us. We're at historypodcast@howstuffworks.com, or you can look us up on Facebook, of course, or at Twitter at Missed in History.
So I think I'm going to head off and start maybe planning a great dictionary dinner, because that sounds really
It just
fun.
sounds good. Yeah, you don't want to do the dictionary research, but you want to have the dictionary dinner.
Maybe everybody could come as a word. Never know. That would be fun.
Oh, I like that.
All right, I'll invite you, Devlina.
Thank you.
So if you're not going to go plan your own dictionary party, we do have an article written by Molly Edmonds called How Can You Tell If You're Mentally Ill? And you can find it by searching for that title on our homepage at www.howstuffworks.com.
This podcast is brought to you by Audible.com, the internet's leading provider of audiobooks with more than 100,000 downloadable titles across all types of literature and featuring audio versions of many New York Times bestsellers. To try Audible free today and get a free audiobook of your choice, go to audiblepodcast.com/historystuff.